She woke up every day before the sun rose. The house was always quiet at that hour, but her mind was already tired. She would sit on the edge of the thin mattress on the floor, stretch her aching hands, and take a slow breath before starting another long day. This house was not hers, yet she knew every corner of it better than anyone else. She had lived here for years, not as family, not as a guest, but as a maid. Her day always began in the kitchen. She washed dishes left from the night before, cleaned the counters, and prepared breakfast, just the way the lady of the house demanded. Too much salt meant scolding. Too little meant insults. If something burned, she was called careless. If everything was perfect, no one said thank you. Silence was the only reward she ever got. The family was rich, well known in the area, and proud of their status. They spoke loudly about their success, their business, and their respect in society. Yet inside the house, their behavior changed. The maid was treated like she was invisible. When they spoke to her, their words were sharp and cold. Sometimes they did not even use her name. They called her that girl or the maid as if she was not human. She had learned long ago to keep her head down. Arguing only made things worse. Tears were useless here. So she swallowed every insult and continued working. While cleaning the floors, she heard them laughing in the living room. While washing their clothes, she listened to them complain about how useless she was. Every word hurt, but she never reacted. People often wondered why she stayed. The answer was simple. She had no other choice. Her small village was far away, and life there was even harder. Her only living parent was sick and needed medicine every month. There was also a younger sibling who depended on her completely. This job, no matter how painful, was the only way she could send money home at night. When everyone slept, she allowed herself a few quiet moments. She would sit by the small window in the servants' room and stare at the dark sky. Sometimes she whispered prayers. Other times she just stayed silent, letting the tiredness wash over her. She missed the person she once was, before life forced her into silence. The family believed she was uneducated and slow. They often mocked the way she spoke, or how carefully she read labels on food items. What they did not know was that she could read very well. She understood numbers too. Before life broke her path, she had gone to school and dreamed of something better. But dreams do not survive easily in poverty. As months turned into years, her role in the house became bigger. She handled shopping, paid small bills, and sometimes even answered phone calls when the family was away. They trusted her with keys, documents, and important information, not because they respected her, but because they thought she was harmless. To them, she was just a maid who would never dare to do anything beyond cleaning. Yet she noticed everything. She noticed how money moved in and out of the house. She noticed arguments about business deals, debts, and secrets spoken carelessly in front of her. She noticed papers thrown into the trash without being torn. She noticed how the family treated others the same way they treated her, with pride and cruelty. One afternoon, while she was cleaning the study room, the man of the house shouted at her for touching his table. He accused her of trying to steal, even though nothing was missing. His words were loud enough for neighbors to hear. She stood there quietly, eyes lowered, hands shaking slightly. After he left the room, she picked up the fallen papers from the floor and placed them back neatly. Her face showed no anger, but something changed deep inside her. The insults became part of her daily life. If guests came over, she was blamed for everything that went wrong. If a glass broke, it was her fault. If food was late, it was her fault. Sometimes the lady of the house would remind her that she was lucky to even be allowed to live under their roof. Those words stayed with her long after the voice faded. Still, she never missed her duties. She worked honestly, with patience and care. Even when she was sick, she continued. Even when her body begged for rest, she pushed herself forward. She believed that good work was the only thing no one could take away from her. There were moments when she almost left. Once, after a harsh insult, she packed her small bag and sat near the door for hours. But then she thought about home, about medicine costs, about school fees. Slowly, she unpacked her bag and returned to the kitchen. Survival always won over pride. The family never asked about her life. They never wondered where she came from or what she had lost. To them, her past did not matter. What mattered was that the floors were clean and food was ready on time. They did not see the quiet strength growing inside her. Years passed like this, heavy and slow. Each insult added weight to her silence. Each unfair word sharpened her memory. She began to understand that patience did not mean weakness. It meant waiting. Waiting for the right time. Waiting for truth to rise. By the end of this part of her life, she had become someone different on the inside. Still quiet. Still obedient on the outside. But her eyes no longer held fear. They held awareness. She knew the house better than anyone. She knew the people inside it. And without realizing it fully, the family had already given her something dangerous. They had given her access, time, and knowledge. And she was watching everything. The next phase of her life inside that house passed quietly. But it was not empty. Every day followed the same routine. Yet something inside her kept growing. The insults no longer shocked her the way they once did. They still hurt. But she had learned how to hide the pain deep inside and let her face stay calm. The family believed she had accepted her place completely. That belief made them careless. She continued working from early morning till late night. Cooking, cleaning, shopping, and caring for every small detail of the house became her responsibility. If something went wrong, she was blamed. If everything went right, it was ignored. Slowly, she stopped expecting fairness from them. Instead, she focused on learning. Whenever she went to the market, she noticed how prices changed and how payments were made. When bills arrived, she watched how they were checked and signed. Sometimes she was asked to deposit money or collect papers. The family trusted her with these tasks because they thought she was too simple to understand anything important. That was their biggest mistake. At night after finishing all her work, she began reading again. Old newspapers, discarded letters, and documents left carelessly around the house became her teachers. She read slowly, carefully, making sure no one noticed. Her mind, once pushed into silence, started waking up again. There were moments when memories from her past returned. She remembered a time when her family lived with dignity, a time when education mattered and honesty was valued. She remembered the sudden fall, the lies, and how everything was taken from them. Those memories did not make her weak. They reminded her who she truly was. Inside the house, arguments between the family members became more frequent. They talked loudly about business deals, unpaid loans, and people they had fooled. They never cared that she was nearby. To them, she was part of the furniture. She listened without reacting, but every word stayed in her mind. One evening, while cleaning the study room, she found a stack of papers thrown in a corner. They were old, but important. She did not take them. She only read them and put them back exactly as she found them. From that day on, she started connecting small pieces of information together. Things that once seemed confusing now began to make sense. The family's behavior toward her did not change. Some days were worse than others. Sometimes the lady of the house would shout at her for no reason at all. Other days, the man of the house would accuse her of wasting money or time. She accepted it all quietly, but she was no longer helpless. Outside the house, neighbors noticed her calm nature. A few of them spoke kindly to her when the family was not around. They told her she was patient and strong. She smiled politely, but never shared her thoughts. She had learned that silence kept her safe. Her connection with her family back home remained her only emotional support. Letters were rare, but whenever she received one, she read it again and again. Knowing that her hard work was keeping them alive gave her strength. It reminded her why she had endured so much. Slowly, the family began depending on her more than they realized. They asked her to handle phone calls, manage visitors, and even keep track of appointments. She performed every task with honesty. Not once did she misuse their trust. That honesty made her powerful. There came a day when the family faced a small crisis. A payment was delayed, and panic filled the house. She calmly suggested a solution. For the first time, they listened. When the problem was solved, they took the credit and ignored her contribution. She did not mind. She was learning how their world worked. At night, she often lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about justice, about patience, and about timing. She knew that rushing would destroy everything. Life had taught her that real change comes slowly, often when least expected. Her body still worked like a servant's, but her mind was free. She understood that knowledge was her shield. Every insult she endured was adding to her strength, not taking away from it. The family believed they owned her time, her effort, and her silence. What they did not realize was that they had given her something much greater. They had given her insight into their lives, their weaknesses, and their hidden truths. By the end of this stage, she was no longer just surviving. She was preparing, quietly, carefully, without anger, and somewhere deep inside. She knew that the years of insults were leading her toward a moment that would change everything. Years of silent endurance. Careful observation and hidden learning had brought her to a point where she could see everything clearly. She understood the family better than anyone else. She knew their habits, their secrets, and the mistakes they had made over the years. But she did not act yet. Patience was still her tool. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon. The family's youngest child had spilled juice on an expensive carpet. The lady of the house screamed at her in front of all the neighbors, calling her clumsy, lazy, and useless. The man of the house joined in, blaming her for the damage and suggesting she should pay for it from her own wages. She stood silently, head bowed, but inside something shifted that evening. After everyone left, she sat alone in the kitchen. The rain tapped against the windows and the house was quiet except for the soft dripping of water from the roof. She cleaned the spilled juice carefully, making sure no stain remained, but she did not do it out of fear or obedience. She did it to show herself that she still controlled her actions, that she had not let anger or humiliation cloud her mind. For the first time, she began thinking in terms of action, not reaction. She remembered every insult, every harsh word, and every unfair treatment. She remembered every time the family had mocked her, ignored her, or tried to make her feel small. Each memory became a step toward understanding how to regain her own power. Over the next few days, she paid even closer attention to the family's business dealings. She observed the accounts, the payments, and the contracts. The family believed she was focused only on household chores. They did not notice that she was quietly documenting every small mistake they had made. She discovered loans that were unpaid, deals that had been mishandled, and papers that were incomplete or forged. She realized that the family's wealth was not as secure as they believed. One evening, the man of the house left the office door open while speaking on the phone. He mentioned overdue debts, threats from business partners, and hidden assets in another city. She listened carefully, memorizing details that could one day be used. The lady of the house spoke about property titles that were technically incorrect and contracts that could be challenged in court. She wrote all these down discreetly, always making sure no one saw her notes. Meanwhile, the family's behavior toward her remained cruel. They did not suspect that she had changed. They continued to insult her, scold her, and humiliate her in public. They mocked her education, her appearance, and her background. They assumed she had no understanding of business or law, but she was learning from every careless word and document. One day, a distant relative visited the house. They talked about the family's wealth and how everything should be passed down carefully. She listened quietly, but her mind was already calculating. She realized that many of the claims they were making were legally weak. She also realized that she could protect herself and her family if she acted carefully. She continued working diligently, pretending nothing had changed. She smiled when they demanded tasks, stayed calm during scoldings, and performed every duty with perfection. Behind that calm exterior, however, a plan was forming. She was patient, waiting for the right moment to act. At night, she often sat by the small window of her room, thinking about justice and fairness. She thought about how patience had brought her here, how endurance had strengthened her mind, and how knowledge had become her weapon. She no longer felt powerless. She felt prepared, Then came the day that changed everything. A small argument in the office escalated into shouting and threats. The man of the house accused her of causing delays in payments, even though she had done nothing wrong. She stood silently, letting the accusations wash over her. The lady of the house joined in, laughing cruelly and blaming her for other mistakes as well. That evening, she quietly packed her small bag with essential documents she had copied over the years. She had legal records, receipts, letters, and proofs of the family's hidden errors. She also kept notes about every insult, every unfair action, and every neglect. She did not plan to act out of anger. She planned to act wisely, legally, and decisively. For the first time, she did not feel fear. She felt calm determination. The years of insults had taught her patience. The years of work had given her knowledge. The years of observation had given her clarity. Now, she had the opportunity to balance the scales. She waited until the family was asleep before reviewing her plan. Her strategy was simple. She would not steal. She would not harm. She would use the truth, evidence, and legal rights to claim what was rightfully hers and to correct injustices. She checked every paper, every note, every detail. She knew that one wrong move could ruin everything. The next morning, she acted with precision. She sent letters to authorities, prepared legal notices, and contacted people whose rights had been ignored by the family. Every step was calculated, every action deliberate. She moved quickly but carefully, making sure the family could not suspect her involvement. Within days, the cracks in the family's wealth began to show. Bank accounts were frozen due to unpaid debts. Properties were challenged legally. Business partners questioned agreements. The family, once confident and arrogant, started to panic. They could not understand how their empire, built over decades, was beginning to crumble. Throughout all this, she remained calm. She continued her household duties, spoke politely when spoken to, and kept the family unaware of the changes happening behind the scenes. She had become invisible in the right ways and powerful in the ways that mattered. The house that had once been a place of humiliation had now become a place where justice quietly took shape. She did not act out of revenge. She acted to restore balance, to protect herself, and to secure the future she deserved. Every insult, every harsh word, every unfair treatment had prepared her for this moment. By the end of this stage, she was no longer the same person who had walked into the house years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and patient beyond measure. The family, still blind to her abilities, continued their daily lives as if nothing was happening. But the wheels of change had already begun to turn, and she knew that very soon. The family would face consequences for their arrogance, cruelty, and carelessness. She had waited, watched, and learned. Now it was time for truth to rise. The days following her careful actions were tense, but she did not show it. Every morning, she woke up early, prepared breakfast, and cleaned the house as if nothing had changed. To the family, she was still the quiet maid who had served them for years. But behind her calm exterior, she was aware of every movement, every whisper. Every mistake they made, it started with small signs. A phone call from the bank had the man of the house pacing nervously, speaking in hushed tones about unexpected holds on accounts. Bills that were once easily paid suddenly arrived with warnings. Legal notices that had been ignored for years began to demand attention. The family could not understand what was happening. They started blaming each other. She continued her work in silence, watching them panic. Every insult she had endured, every cruel word now fueled her resolve to act carefully and with precision. She did not laugh. She did not gloat. She only observed. Knowledge had given her power. Patience had given her strategy, and now action was showing its effects. The first real confrontation came. When a lawyer arrived with a notice regarding a property the family had believed was theirs without question, they argued loudly, trying to intimidate the lawyer. But she knew the law and had prepared everything correctly. The documents she had gathered over the years were in order. Every deed, receipt, and letter backed the claims. The family's arrogance was crumbling under the weight of truth. Business partners, who had once been loyal, began questioning agreements. Debts that had been ignored for years were suddenly highlighted in court. The family scrambled. trying to fix mistakes that had been accumulating for decades. They looked around for answers, but no one seemed able to guide them. They had relied on appearances and arrogance, and that was now failing them. Despite the chaos, she continued her duties with precision. Breakfast was on time, rooms were spotless, and laundry was perfect. The family, distracted by their growing panic, failed to notice her calm control. She handled their meals, their schedules, and even visitors, while the walls of their wealth shook. Neighbors began noticing unusual activity. There were whispers of lawsuits, frozen accounts, and unexpected property claims. The family grew desperate, calling relatives, hiring consultants, and trying to find a solution. Every step they took to recover control only exposed more mistakes and weaknesses. She had anticipated this, quietly allowing events to unfold, letting their overconfidence lead them into deeper trouble. One day, the man of the house called her angrily into the study. He accused her of negligence, of somehow causing the confusion. She stayed calm, simply handing him the papers he asked for. Her face remained neutral, revealing nothing. He left the room, frustrated and confused. He did not realize that the very documents she had prepared would soon confirm her innocence and highlight their own errors. As the family's wealth and reputation began to crumble, they started turning on each other. Arguments became louder, and trust between them vanished. The lady of the house blamed her husband for ignoring contracts. The man blamed his children for poor decisions. They did not look at the maid, the one who had quietly stayed in the background. But she was always watching, always aware, and always ready. Legal representatives, accountants, and authorities became regular visitors. Each time she handled them with professionalism. She answered questions politely, presented documents accurately, and ensured that every step followed the law. Her knowledge, once underestimated, now became the foundation of their unraveling. Meanwhile, she sent assistance to her own family quietly. Money, support, and help arrived in small ways, ensuring that those she cared about were secure while she dealt with the family's chaos. She did not take more than she needed. She did not seek revenge. Her goal was justice and balance. The final blow came when a major property that the family believed secure was legally challenged. The family had assumed that their status and arrogance could protect them. They did not realize that her careful documentation over the years would expose hidden debts, unpaid claims, and mistakes in contracts. Lawyers arrived with complete evidence, leaving the family shocked, speechless, powerless. Despite the chaos, she continued her daily chores. She served meals, cleaned rooms, and answered visitors politely. The family could not comprehend how she remained calm while their world collapsed. They looked at her as they once had, thinking she was powerless, failing to understand that she had already outsmarted them. Neighbors and outsiders began to notice the change. The family, once proud and feared, was now humbled and anxious. Rumors spread about legal actions, frozen accounts, and lost properties. The maid's quiet control became evident only to those who watched carefully. She had remained in the shadows, letting the natural consequences of truth and evidence unfold. By the end of this stage, the family had lost much of what they once believed untouchable. They had lost money, respect, and control. The very people who had humiliated her for years were now facing the results of their arrogance and carelessness. She had remained honest, lawful, and patient. Every insult she had endured had prepared her to act wisely and decisively. She looked at the house differently now. The rooms that had once been filled with scorn and cruelty now symbolized knowledge, preparation, and justice. She had quietly taken control without raising her voice, without anger, and without revenge. She had waited for the right moment and acted with intelligence, and she knew that the final step was near. The moment when the family would fully understand the consequences of their actions and recognize too late the quiet power of the maid they had underestimated for so many years. The final chapter of her long journey began with a quiet sense of peace. The house, once filled with insults, arrogance, and fear, had become silent in its own way. The family, humbled and anxious, faced the results of their careless years. They could no longer rely on wealth, influence, or their status to protect them. They were left to deal with the consequences of their own actions. She continued her work as if nothing had changed. Each day she cleaned, cooked, and cared for the house with the same diligence. Yet inside she felt lighter. The heavy burden of humiliation had been replaced by calm satisfaction. She had endured insults, learned, planned, and acted with patience and intelligence. Justice had quietly been served. The family, once dismissive of her abilities, now found themselves relying on her expertise unknowingly. In legal meetings, in dealing with authorities, answering questions about documents, she provided information politely and clearly. Every answer she gave, every document she presented, was accurate and honest. They could not blame her, nor could they deny that she had helped clarify the chaos they had created themselves. She did not seek revenge. She did not shout or lecture. Her actions were always guided by fairness and law. Every step she had taken was to restore balance and to correct mistakes. She had helped ensure that money, property, and rights were returned to those who were truly entitled to them. She had acted with integrity, proving that patience and intelligence could outshine cruelty and arrogance. Her own family benefited quietly. Money she sent, help she provided, and support she arranged allowed them to live with dignity. Her younger sibling could attend school regularly, her sick parent could afford proper care, and her family slowly rebuilt what had once been lost. Every small act of kindness she managed in secrecy reminded her why she had endured so much. Neighbors began noticing the change. The family who had once looked down on her was now visibly humbled. They walked with caution, spoke in whispers, and avoided the people they had once mocked. Some villagers began to tell stories of the maid who had quietly outsmarted a wealthy family. They admired her patience, courage, and intelligence. She did not seek recognition, but she had earned respect naturally. Inside the house, the atmosphere had changed. Arguments were quieter, panic had replaced arrogance, and a sense of humility was slowly creeping in. The family realized, too late, that the person they had treated with disdain and cruelty had been the one who could navigate their mistakes, clarify their problems, and act with precision. They understood the cost of underestimating someone based on status or appearance. She often sat by her small window at night, looking out at the quiet streets. The journey had been long and painful, but she had learned many lessons. Patience was a weapon. Silence could be strength. Intelligence and careful observation could overcome injustice. Every insult she endured had prepared her for this moment. Every harsh word had sharpened her mind. Every unfair act had made her stronger. One afternoon, the family finally approached her cautiously. They apologized, carefully and humbly, for their years of insults and mistreatment. They spoke softly, acknowledging her contributions and the mistakes they had made. She listened quietly. She accepted their apology in a calm manner, without anger or resentment. The power of forgiveness, combined with the results of her careful planning, became the final lesson. She decided to leave the house soon after. There was nothing more to gain here for her. She had restored balance, secured her family, and shown the truth through patience and intelligence. She packed her small belongings and quietly prepared to start a new life. The family, now humbled, could only watch as the maid who had served them for years stepped out of their lives with dignity. Her journey forward was filled with hope. She helped her family rebuild. She supported neighbors who were struggling. She quietly shared wisdom with those who needed guidance. Her strength was not in wealth, anger, or revenge. It was in endurance, patience, and intelligence. She became a symbol of quiet power, showing that one could rise above cruelty and injustice without losing integrity. Even years later, people remembered her story. They remembered the maid who endured insults silently, who watched, learned, and acted with precision. They remembered the family who had underestimated her and learned a hard lesson in humility. Her story became one of inspiration, proving that strength is not always loud, power is not always visible, and justice can come quietly but effectively. She walked through her new life with confidence and calm. Every choice she made reflected her values: honesty, patience, and care for those who truly mattered. Her past struggles remained a part of her, but they no longer weighed her down. They had shaped her into a person who could face any challenge with clarity, wisdom, and dignity. The house she left behind remained a memory, a place where injustice had once flourished, but where patience and intelligence had quietly prevailed. The family had learned, finally, the cost of arrogance, cruelty, and carelessness. She had taught them without words, only through careful action and unwavering integrity. And as she continued her life, helping, guiding, and supporting those around her, she knew that true strength was not in wealth, status, or power. True strength was in patience, knowledge, and the courage to endure, learn, and act when the time was right. After leaving the house that had once been a place of constant insult and humiliation, she began her life anew. The streets of her new neighborhood were unfamiliar, but she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of silence, anger, and patience that had once anchored her to that home had lifted. Each step she took now was deliberate, filled with purpose, and guided by the wisdom she had gained through years of endurance. Her first priority was her family. She sent for them quietly, ensuring that her sick parent had proper care and her younger sibling could attend school without worry. The small home she arranged for them was modest but warm, a stark contrast to the cold wealth she had left behind. She managed it with care, ensuring bills were paid, food was sufficient, and safety was guaranteed. For the first time, her family could relax. Knowing they were supported, she did not rest, even with the satisfaction of victory behind her. She began looking for opportunities to help others who were in situations similar to the one she had endured. Neighbors, acquaintances, and even strangers who had been wronged or underestimated by those in power found in her a source of guidance. She taught them how to observe carefully, how to remain patient, and how to act wisely when the moment was right. Her experiences gave her credibility and empathy that few could match. Every day she reflected on her journey. She remembered the endless insults, the humiliation, and the long nights of fear. But she also remembered the lessons: patience, observation, intelligence, and action at the right moment. She realized that suffering could become strength, and silence could become strategy. Her past no longer held her back. It was now the foundation of her wisdom. In her new life, she began small projects to earn income and support herself. She opened a tiny store selling household goods, managing it with care and honesty. Customers appreciated her integrity, and word spread quickly about her reliability. Her store became a place where people could not only buy goods, but also seek advice and guidance. She found fulfillment in helping others while maintaining her independence. One afternoon, she received a letter from a former neighbor who had witnessed the downfall of the wealthy family. The letter expressed admiration and respect, praising her patience, intelligence, and fairness. It reminded her that her story had inspired others, and that even the quietest acts of endurance could leave a lasting impact. She smiled, realizing that recognition was not her goal, but a byproduct of living rightly. Despite the calm and satisfaction of her new life, she remained vigilant. The world could be unfair, and people often underestimated others. She paid attention to the small details, ensuring that no one could take advantage of her or her family. Her vigilance was not born from fear, but from wisdom. She had learned that preparedness was a form of freedom. Her former employers occasionally attempted to contact her, seeking help with matters they no longer understood. They were cautious, embarrassed, and humbled. She handled each interaction with calm professionalism. She provided information, ensured fairness, and reminded them subtly of the lessons they had ignored. They left each encounter quietly, carrying a new respect for the person they had once belittled. As time passed, she also focused on personal growth. She read books, learned new skills, and explored opportunities she had never had before. Her intellect, patience, and experience allowed her to understand the world in ways that others often overlooked. She became self-reliant, confident, and wise. Using her past as a guide rather than a limitation, Her family thrived under her guidance. Her younger sibling excelled in school, inspired by the example of hard work and resilience. Her parent received proper care, regaining some strength and health. The family, once dependent on her survival alone, now had a sense of security and hope. She watched them grow with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her sacrifices and endurance had secured their future. Neighbors began to rely on her even more. They sought her advice for resolving disputes, managing finances, and dealing with unfair situations. She became a trusted figure in her community, admired for her integrity, wisdom, and calm demeanor. Her influence was quiet but strong, proving that power did not need to be loud or visible to be effective. One evening, as she sat alone in her small room, she reflected on the journey from the House of Insults to her current life. The contrast was stark. She had endured scorn, humiliation, and disrespect for years, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more respected than ever. She understood now that endurance, observation, and patience were not weaknesses, but tools that could shape destiny. She also realized the importance of balance. Her past experiences had taught her that revenge brought only temporary satisfaction. True power lay in acting with intelligence, fairness, and foresight. She had helped her former family face the consequences of their arrogance, but she had done so without malice. Justice had been served quietly, effectively, and with dignity in her daily routine. She continued to support her family, community, and herself. She balanced work, learning, and guidance, finding fulfillment in each aspect of her life. She discovered that true happiness did not come from wealth or recognition, but from living with integrity, helping others, and facing challenges with patience and wisdom. As the years passed, her story became known in the neighborhood and beyond. People shared tales of the maid who had endured insults silently, learned from every challenge, and acted wisely to secure justice for herself and her family. She never sought fame, but her life became an example of quiet strength, resilience, and the power of intelligence guided by patience. Her new life was not without challenges, but she faced each one with calm determination. She understood that life would always test patience, wisdom, and integrity, but she was prepared. The lessons from her past had shaped her into someone capable of navigating difficulties with clarity, fairness, and courage. In the end, she understood that the journey of endurance and patience was not just about surviving insults or overcoming injustice. It was about becoming a person of strength, wisdom, and dignity. Every hardship, every humiliation, and every moment of silence had contributed to the person she had become. And as she continued her life, quietly helping her family, her neighbors, and herself, she knew that true power was not in wealth, status, or anger. True power was in patience, observation, intelligence, and the courage to act wisely when the moment was right. Her journey had proven it, and her life continued as a testament to the strength of quiet resilience and careful wisdom.